We were already having good. We were already having good conversation, right?
I know, it's like the pre stuff. It's always the juicy stuff. So we're gonna start, and hey everyone who will watch us on recording. Um, it's me and it's Liz, and I'm happy to have Liz with us today. I'm a little nervous. I'm hearing myself getting tongue tied. I'm a little nervous, but so excited to talk with you. And if you don't know Liz, introduce you to this amazing person. So, Liz, if you don't mind opening us, well, you open us however you choose. I'd love to hear a poem from you, and I'd love to hear about you. And you can do that in whichever way feels most comfortable for you.
Sure. So I'll tell you sort of the Liz, the outward Liz first, and I'll read the poem, if that's okay. So yeah, I think the poem I chose is about me, which might introduce people a little bit more to me anyway. But I'm so happy to be here with you. Any opportunity I get to just chat with you and be in your world for a little bit is an honor. And so thank you. Thank you, thank you. I am, isn't that funny? Sometimes I'm like, wait, who am I? Who am I today? So officially, right? Like what do I do? Sometimes, right? We define ourselves with what do I do? So I'm a health educator. I've been working in public health for the whole of my professional life, which is now close to 30 years. I currently work for the University of Nevada, Reno as one of their public health faculty. And really, I work remotely. So I am a Jersey girl. I am in New Jersey working in the state of Nevada, which I still don't say the name the way I'm supposed to say the name of the state when I'm there, but I'm learning. And I work on some really cool, like mostly nationwide projects, but also some in the state around cultural competency and rural health. I also teach public health. So I teach at this semester, I'm teaching at Rutgers University, and I teach at William Patterson University and other schools here in the state of New Jersey, mostly. I'm also a doula, which I love that you put that in my bio. So I've been working as a birth worker, but also I can also assist people through different transitions, life transitions as well. So it's really being a doula is about holding space for people and accompanying them in whatever is going on in their lives at the moment. Mostly though, I've been working around birth and postpartum. And poet, it's always, that's the one thing that doesn't necessarily slide off my tongue, right? Because it's always that interesting thing of like, are you a poet if you haven't published yet? Or if others aren't calling you that, or if you're not here or there, but you know, we are what we sometimes do. We are what we believe we are. And I'm also a parent, and I'm a sex educator. That's the public health stuff. That's how I started my career. And yeah, and I'm human. Most of the time, I'm trying to be human in the best way possible. So I was so happy you asked me to read a poem because it's been a while. I've been a little quiet around my poetry lately, and just kind of trying to be good with it, give myself some grace and say right now it's a quiet time. I may be creating in different ways, and that's okay. So it was nice to kind of come back and revisit some of my favorite poems. So I chose a poem actually that I titled about me. I'm horrible with titles. I tend not to title them, but this is hopefully part of it's a poem that's part of the manuscript of what I will hopefully publish soon-ish. Okay, should I read it now, Jen?
Yes, please do. And Carly has joined us, so I typed welcome in the chat, but welcome, Carly. Good to see you. And we're recording, just so you know, but go ahead and read your poem, Liz.
All right. So it's about me. I no longer speak to a cousin because of how he treated my mother. My father, because he just stopped calling. My grandmother, because she died. A favorite uncle and childhood friends, as well, dead. But I talk to strangers, clouds, and ghosts, and all the monsters in my head. In 30 years, I am going to be an old man who buys bread early in the morning, brings it home to his wife, who will have coffee on the table. I will sit and read the paper. In 20 years, I am going to be reckless again, travel with no itinerary, read all day, and only take calls for my children. In 10 years, less now, I am going to be a woman who visits her children in college, takes them out to dinner with their friends, laughs loudly while telling dirty jokes, and wears lace underwear again. Tomorrow, I'm going to be a human who dreams about napping more often, yet still stays up late watching TV and grading, who makes lists in her head, forgets and remembers and forgets, and writes a poem again. I may spend my old age only wearing t-shirts and nothing else. I may decide to wear suits looking sharp and unavailable on every other Tuesday. I may wear long skirts and flowers in my hair on the evenings when ghosts visit. I may wear my skin with ease, finally, whisper erotic tales to it every morning, run my fingertips on every scar, knowing every single secret to contentment. I've been known to fantasize about parallel lives, different choices and paths taken, what ifs, are interesting dance partners, seducing me into drunken stupors. Most days I'm sober and slow waltzing with reality, caught by surprise at how in love I really am with the boat I chose to sail. So many moments leave me breathless. Often I just don't think I'm doing my best. It evades me, leaves me so damn exhausted. I ride a roller coaster daily. Instead of exhilarated, I end up disappointed, like I somehow was in charge of the loops and forgot. My children go to school and I suddenly remember the lessons I promised to teach them when I was 7 months pregnant, panicking at how much is missed while trying to be my best. That bird outside my window might be the only reason I get in the shower. I rise from sweet morning slumber because of the children and that pesky bus they must ride, and school they must attend. But if it were not for this bird doing what he must, I might crawl back into bed. That's it.
Oh, thank you. Ooh. So I asked you to read a poem because you had, was it during National Poetry Month? When you read a poem a day, maybe a year or two ago.
It was.
And I just found your poems so soothing, and reading them, hearing them in your voice so soothing. Carly says that was beautiful in all
Thank you.
caps. And so thank you for reading that, because it just, I don't know, all the way soaks all the way to my bones how you read.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Thanks for asking. It was nice to revisit it.
Oh, it's a gift. It's a gift to us. I don't want to put that pressure on you that it's a gift. So, you know, and also take away the fact that there's work and there's life and there's observation that goes behind the creating. So I sent you like a short list of questions, and I'm going to veer just a little to the left, not entirely, because I would love to hear if you could talk a little bit about first how you feel poetry might be a piece of liberation work for yourself, maybe even sharing with others. I'd love to hear that from you.
I love that. I do think that is why I write. And I started writing. Well, I've been writing since I was probably 10. Yeah, I think it was my 10th birthday. My mother gave me my first journal. And now, or really like in the past 10 years, the concept of liberation has become so much more real to me, right? In terms of how I stand as, you know, a Latina person living in this world that is not necessarily safe for so many. But also, so that's like the system-wide thing, right? And also though, what happens even within the four walls of my home and then in my brain. And so writing down what I'm feeling, the frustration sometimes that I'm feeling.
Should we have fish tonight?
The
Yeah. Take out the halibut.
Oh, that sounds good.
Yeah. There we go. I think we're good. That is too funny.
Food
Okay.
planning. I'm a horrible food
Halibut.
planner. I kind of love
Yeah,
that. I love that,
right.
Carly.
And it's a very
Um,
everyday kind of moment, right?
yes.
So,
Feeling like, yeah, so feeling like I can put it all down, just put it all down. And like that frees me from like all the jumbled up things that are in my head trying to survive, right? And I hate that because really so much I feel of my life has been trying to survive instead of really looking at me thriving. And when I started putting things down on, really not on paper, not anymore, really it's on my phone.
uh-huh.
And in random moments, right? It could be that I was like waiting for the kids to come out of school, waiting for class to start. Like sometimes, just whenever any ideas, any lines would come in, sometimes it'd be me driving and just saying like, Siri, take this down. Because what I'm noticing, right, that the more, and I'm so glad, the universe, I think, always gives me the opportunities, right, when it's precisely the time. Because just talking about this, I'm like, yeah, Liz, you need this. Carly, you're not a mess, you're human, and it's perfect. Perfect. This opportunity to just let my thoughts come down and then sit with them and say, well, how does this sound? How does this land with others? Because I really do love that process. We're in community. Community is so incredibly important. So I decided, gosh, I don't even know, because I think everything was just like 5 years ago. And then I realized, wait, no, that was like 15 years ago. I have no idea. But so I used to write poetry that I would call bad poetry, like hashtag bad poetry, and then put bad poetry heals. The reason why I called it bad poetry was because it wasn't edited, right? It was like just what came out of my head and boom, there it goes. I also like to play with bad, right? Like, I don't know, maybe growing up in the 80s, like bad was not necessarily bad. It was like good, like that kind of, but what I noticed was that more and more people were saying, that wasn't bad. And then I felt like I was fishing for compliments. And also, but also at camp, at Patty Dye's camp, at one point I had, just some amazing, friends who said, you need to stop calling it bad. Like it needs to find some other way to land. And I took it to heart. And then I heard, I don't remember who the poet was. And every time I tell the story, I'm like, I have to look up who this poet was. But I was listening to On Being, and there was a poet on there who shared how she was writing poetry and calling it heart poetry when she didn't edit it. Okay. And I just love that concept. I'm like, that's what I'm doing. I'm not editing it because I want it to just come out the way it does, because that feels liberating, right? Because so much of my existence has been about being as perfect, which is of course unattainable, but as I possibly could be, right? As a young child, English was my second language. I was one of the only Spanish speaking households, kind of not typical. Like I grew up in a very second gen neighborhood of Polish and Hungarian immigrants, and I was like always kind of like a little, different. So I learned how to speak English as well as I could, just showing up always, just like practicing. I'd rehearse things in conversations or all the time. So then to feel like, wait, hold on, I could just put my poetry out there, my thoughts, and who cares? Like, so I started calling them heart poetry. And yeah, that contributes to me feeling a bit freer, right? A bit more like there is no perfection ever. And it's in the imperfection actually where we find grace and we find beauty and we find that we are more connected to one another, so that helps me.
Yeah, in life, right? And as you were talking, I thought, to your point about like we're in community, so sharing it. I feel like when I started, you talking about your poetry helped me to recognize how I didn't feel like I was good at poetry, at understanding it or liking it. You take poetry, as a part of your sort of course requirements, and it's very rigid, and they're very specific people that I know when I was in school that English teachers had very specific people that they counted as poets. And I mean, I felt like I remember thinking about my English teachers in particular, really being in love with the things they were teaching. And I was like, okay, I would do the work, but I didn't feel the passion. And I always felt that it was my deficiency, that I was
Mm-hmm.
missing something. And then, of course, my mom would introduce me to like Nikki Giovanni and the poets, that spoke to her, and that was both lovely but also like coming from my mom. Now I'm like, I get it, but there's something about having friends who are living right. Well, Nikki Giovanni's a living writing poet. That's not what I mean, but just like who offer you this sort of access to this beautiful way of expression that is liberating, and just feeling like I do like poetry and I do get poetry and I do find myself in poetry. It was just that I didn't find myself in what was offered to me. And
Yeah.
because I love hearing that it's not edited. It sounds so like beautifully curated to me. I'm like, what? It's not edited. Just that, but that's also your, how you've cultivated, if I can say that, you're maybe nurtured, you're noticing in such a way that it comes out, and it is liberating for us who hear it, because it feels so like, oh yeah, I feel that. And or like it just I was gonna say it sounds like poetry, which is what it is. And
Poetry
just so,
everywhere.
yeah, and your poetry makes me feel that sort of smittenness that I used to see in my English teachers when they talked about their
Mm.
favorite poets, and gives me sort of access to that joy and that sort of connection and presence to being here in life, which I think is a part of liberation. We fight for liberation, and I think sometimes it can become really academic and intense in a way that we can also miss that our what we're working toward is that people get to be in our lives and have access and be present and be safe.
Mm-hmm.
And
There's so many scripts, right? So even in liberation, we're told this is the way you have to do it. And if you
yeah,
somehow veer in any other direction, you think you're not doing it right. Gosh,
yeah,
I would think about that as being Latina, right? Like I was like, oh, I'm just not right enough. Like I'm not good enough for this, and I'm for this identity, and I'm not good enough for this other identity. And then when you just can just be, right? And be like, there are no rules. But it reminds me of the poet Mahogany Brown, when she was saying how
mhm,
like people were saying, right, that she's like a street poet. And she's like, excuse me? Like we're making this other genre because you're not fitting into the script of what poetry is, when it's all BS, right? It's, yes, there are rules to some and they can be beautiful. I love writing myself a good haiku. I think they're so much fun. Like those are nice little exercises, right? Because I love the tight, like the smallness of it, right? And the still, like I actually really enjoy that. But don't, that's not, that's curated, right? Like I'm like in my brain and I'm like playing around with it. But when it's my stuff, it's like, here it goes. And then, sometimes I will edit, like if I'm gonna, the ones you saw are all like little, they actually are snippets of different ones I had written and put on social media. And I put it together into one. It's just, so a little editing in those possibly, right? But they were like doom, doom, doom. So there were probably like 4 that I posted like on Instagram with an image. I used to do that a lot. But like I have, my gosh, and it's still in the plastic. So I have this horrible, I'm going to admit to this, it's a very bad thing about me. I love libraries, love, love, love them. But I'm horrible at returning books on time.
yeah,
Okay,
I'm
thank
with you. I'm with you.
Thank you. Horrible. New York libraries now don't charge late fees. I love, love, love them for it, but mine still does. I had to pay an exorbitant amount of money last year because I couldn't return books. And then some, I'm like, okay, this one I had such a hard time returning that my uncle actually gifted it to me. I held on to this one for so long. It's still in the plastic because I'm like, it's just so happy I have it now. I mean,
Yeah.
I got it for for the holidays last year. But like Ntozake Shange, like her, I can only imagine one of these like English professors that I had. I mean, now, not even now, for decades, there have been some professors who will teach her and beautifully, but I was like reading, I was in a very predominantly white institution, taking, you know, like English, whatever. I was an English minor. So I could just like, this might not even be considered the amazing work of art that it really is, right? So young people, all of us, not even young people, but it's sadly, a lot of the experience we have as young people will then dictate how we see the world, right, as we get older. So poetry is ruined in that way for so many young people when you're only teaching in one direction, instead of like letting people know that there's all sorts of directions you can take. And I mean, you know this as an artist, right? As a like, oh my goodness, I still struggle, right? Like to say like, oh yeah, no, I can paint, I can draw. Of course I can. It might not be the prettiest or but like we all can. It just may not be, right? Like our thing.
Yeah.
And that's okay too, right? Like each of
Yeah.
us.
Right, because not everything we have to do. So Christine shares that she's also terrible at returning library books. So we're in good company, and I'm going to say this so it's okay. I've not said the same out loud. It was transformational for her in college. That was the comment. So I'm gonna have to. So, and as far as poetry, I have like well, you know what? I'm not gonna apologize. We don't know, but none of us knows everything and everyone. So I am gonna have to though take some time to 4 for late returns. Carly's with us. Solidarity. We're in the club now. And I wanted to, you just said something. Ooh, I can't remember. I got lost in my own, like, just feeling probably small, and nobody made me feel that way. I just felt like, oh, I don't know this person. And it's what you said about doing liberation the right way. Like, there's so much and so much that we're not exposed to that we have to sort of find ourselves. There's no way we're going to know it all. But there's that point sometimes when I find myself maybe shrinking because I feel like, first of all, my memory, even if I did know it at some point, it doesn't mean I know it now. But also that, you know, that I feel like I'm supposed to be able to spit names and facts off the top of my head, or else I'm like a fraud, right? Which
Yes.
is
Yeah,
wow.
so I've been teaching, it's my second year teaching this foundational course in feminism. And my degree, my first degree, my bachelor's is in political science. But again, I went to an institution that was mostly all old white men we learned about, right? And I was not, sadly, like I really wish I had gotten better guidance, because I would have been a really good fit for the women. There was a women's college right in the institution I went to. Now I'm teaching there. And
Nice.
they've asked me to, you know, for this foundational course. So I know a lot of the authors that we're supposed to teach, but a lot of the readings I never did. So I am learning alongside, but that's also my philosophy, which is really nice. Like I'm a co-learner. When I teach, I'm learning right along with the people who are here with me. We're all experts in our own right. So it's why I love teaching, because I'm constantly growing, right, through this interaction that I have with people. So in that, like, you just made me think of the course. It's called Knowledge and Power. So much, like, I'm like, my gosh, how did I not know this? I'm living my life a bit like this, but here's like somebody who's been writing about it, who's been writing about it since the 70s, since like, right. And so here we are, but like being okay with not knowing, to me, is so powerful. And I sometimes am scared to admit to students, right? Like, oh, I'm not quite sure. I've never read this one. And then I never heard of this musician, or never. And then I'm like, this is part of maybe my role of teaching younger people that it's okay to not know. Yeah. So I've taken it upon myself to be just even on, like, now it's even on purpose, which is such a like liberating too, being like,
yeah.
Let's look this up together. How did I ever go to school without Google, right? Take out your phones. Let's look this up. Let's see. Let's explore. Oh, tell me who your favorite musicians are. My goodness, like Chance the Rapper has like these amazing lyrics, or whoever, like Travis Scott. And then of course, if I want to be humbled, admit that I don't know.
Yeah.
And then, have teenagers, they will humble you. And then, but then take it. Be like, that's okay, right? Because that's how we give each other grace. And yeah, I see Christina, right? We're definitely not meant to know everything we can't, and we're all learning together all the time. Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
true. It's so true. And I think, like you said, it models. I mean, as you were talking about it, I could just feel like the difference between that rigidity of being like having to be the knower and how there's no room. It's almost like, like a cell without, like how cells, some have like permeable membranes or whatever, and some don't. Like the one that's impermeable, like you can't get anything in if you have to be the knower and you're rigid. But that open system where things can get in and out is where growth and community happens. And knowledge is
Absolutely.
changing all the time, and history is being made all the time. So there's no way that we can hold everything. So like you are a fascinating person. I already knew that. You already knew that.
That's
Carly
me,
and
Josh.
Christina
I
know
feel the
that.
same thing about you.
Thank you. I want to hear, and I think our conversation is sort of naturally including liberation. So don't feel like bound into that because I feel like you're a rare, in my mind, and experienced human in that you're a professor and a doula and a poet, and you have held workshops on like sensuality and pleasure, and it's like I want to hear how you hold all of that. So I sometimes think of, especially the academic piece, is like almost like squeezing pleasure out. It's sort of like squeeze all the juice out so that you get down to the more, like the way academia sometimes works with information and knowledge. But somehow you've managed to kind of hold it all so beautifully and so impactfully. And I would love to hear like how you do it, if you've thought about how you do it, what keeps you in what sustains you to sort of manage those different roles, whatever you want to tell us about it.
Well, I don't juggle well, I will tell you that. Thinking about that. So I think first, I became a sex educator while I was already in academia. So it didn't feel off, right? And it was when I was a student. I took a course, it was a year course called Sexual Health Advocacy, which is the first time I read Audre Lorde. Oh my gosh, that class was amazing. And I still keep in touch with that professor Ellen Salzberg, she's remarkable. I knew so little. And yet so much of what I did know was that I needed to know so much and I wanted to know so much. I was so thirsty for it. So academia gave that to me. So it's interesting, right, that you said like squeezing the juice out, because actually it's what like offered me this abundance, right? And then I realized like I could actually get paid to talk to people about sex and sexuality. So my first job out of college was, as a sex educator, sexual health educator. So that already like started me on this path. And then sadly, my dream, and this is why I'm doing more of it, is to really be able to talk about pleasure and to be able to talk about all like the positive, wonderful things about being sexual beings. But for the most part, right, it was HIV prevention. It's been more prevention education. It's been more, preventing sexually transmitted infections and talking about like adolescent pregnancy and, to this day, I never thought we would be where we are now in terms of all these policies taking people's rights away, as, in terms of their gender identity and in terms of like access to reproductive care. It's like, I feel like we've advanced in some conversations and then we've gone backwards in so many more. So so yeah, so like academia kind of like prepared me to then go out and start doing this work. I really, the birth work, the doula work was when I started just, so I didn't want to ever have children or be pregnant. Maybe have children but not be pregnant. And then in my late 20s, I was like, I kind of do. This is something that just, yeah, it was bizarre to me, still to this day bizarre. But once I started, like, once I got pregnant and I had a miscarriage first, and that to me was really the first time in my life where I was like, shit doesn't always go right for me. Because I really feel like I kind of lived a charmed life. Not, it was easy and there's all sorts of things, but kind of like I would set my mind to do something and I would do it. You know, with its challenges, but it got done. Support of my mom always, because I cannot deny, I don't think I could have done as much as I did without my mama.
Mhm.
So I will tell you this, and I don't know, it feels appropriate. I don't know if it feels if it's tangential, but when I found out I was going to have a miscarriage, I went to a meeting and I said, so I think I'm going to miss like the next few meetings in the next couple of weeks because I'm miscarrying right now. And I didn't think there was anything wrong about me saying that and sharing that.
Right.
And suddenly there was this outpouring of support and people telling me that they have never heard anyone just talking about a loss like that. I didn't even know miscarriages were that common because no one had ever talked about it to me. And then suddenly I had like, it was just such a beautiful time, but also it shocked me because people were like, that was weird. I was like, that was TMI, but thank you. And so I took that role on, and this was my late 20s. And now this is my 49th year. I'll be 50 in December, just so you have a sense of the timeline. I took that kind of as my role. I was like, this is a horrible time in my life. And I don't even know if I can say it was horrible because now it's like so common and I have never seen people grieve, but it's a loss. It's a loss I still feel to this day, very real. We don't talk about these things, but I can see how people are showing up. Like I made friends as a result of people saying like, hey, Liz, can I have coffee with you? I just want to have a conversation with you about like just how comfortable you were sharing. And I was comfortable because I didn't even know.
Right.
But if I think back, even to this day, like just the other day, I was on a panel for Women's History Month, and I talked about the fact that like I masturbated, and probably I'm here talking about sexuality and everything else because I masturbated and I wasn't allowed to talk about masturbation. And then I realized that was so liberating to actually say it out loud and be like, I'm not the only one. I grew up Catholic thinking I was going to go to hell because I enjoyed my body. And then it made no sense. I had the cognitive dissonance because I'm like, if this is something God created and this amazing clitoris I have, like
Right.
it's here, then
Uh-huh.
like what's going on, right? Like just these weird thoughts. So in everything I do, it's all kind of incorporated, right? Like there are times I mess up and maybe I say something inappropriate in a setting that I shouldn't have. I've learned with experience. I've learned when and where. I also know the experience I have had. It's funny, like when you mentioned academia, is that many times I am hired in positions because of the person that I am and because the what is considered courage to say the things that other people are not comfortable saying. But then once I'm in the system, people don't like it. So I have had there's been conflict around that sometimes where I've been hired to be the person to talk about sexuality and to talk about, all all sorts of things that make people uncomfortable, including like anti-racism and including transgender rights and everything that really falls into the realm of the work that I do. Yeah, being a woman fully, being a human being fully, right, in all of the ways that we can exist, it is an act of resistance for sure, for sure. So um that's where the squeezing out of the juice I have experienced, because there are certain people that say there's these rules, but I got to tell you, right, the people who tell me there's these rules are people who really buy into the fact that um, academia is supposed to be this elitist institution. I mean, that's how they were formed. They were
Yeah.
formed with all these different criteria to be able to join this institution because we only wanted certain people to be there. But you got to walk the talk now. If you're all saying that you want to be more diverse and you want to really be more accessible, then these are the conversations we need to have, and we need to allow this. But even the allowing of, right? It's like these rules. So yeah, that's how I do it. I do it and like I said, imperfectly. I got to make a living, so that's sometimes tough, but I feel very blessed. I've been able to do work I love for the most part. And when I don't like certain things, you know, like I'm like, all right, but I know like in a few hours I'll get to do something I enjoy again. So
What is the reality everywhere, right? Like this sort of as we sort of work toward even with imagining liberation, imagining that today we're all sort of free and everyone's like safe and well resourced and has access to the things that we need in order to thrive. There will still be conflict and misunderstanding and things that we don't want to do. You know what I mean? It just wouldn't be like to serve capitalism and the patriarchy and white supremacy, but there will still be laundry. You know, there will still be dishes in our liberated future. So, and you, what did you say? Oh, and you read that, which
yes, Carly's, yeah.
What was it that I was going to say? Because you said something that really struck me, and we've got about 10 minutes, and I really feel like I want to do a part two because I want to talk to you more, and I want to give people more chance to hear from you. About just sort of when you're pulled in to do liberatory kind of things, like when you're that voice that is brought in to speak those things that maybe people are not comfortable with yet, but they know they need to be said. You're a liberatory voice in that space, but it's like you said, it's like we're working through it. We're trying to allow, but it's like, but can you like, here's the box that in which we're allowing the allowing, you know, like it, you know, sometimes that's necessary, but most times it's like, okay, that's not quite how information works. That's not quite how knowledge works. Like it should be accessible and we're going to be uncomfortable, which makes me want to actually go in our last few minutes to talk about self-care. I feel like self-care kind of came under a little bit of a like people are starting to say basically let's not talk about it anymore, we need to talk about community care, which I'm all for. But I think that it has to be both, because this is the reality that many of us are working in these spaces where, you know, we might embody or be the voice of a resistance that supports other people. We may be supported to some extent, but you still have to really self-care is important so that you can continue to do your work. Can we talk about that a bit?
I've been really interested in following the conversations right now around community care, because I guess for me too, it was a little shocking because I was like, oh, I've never separated the two.
Right.
Right? So I'm like,
Yes.
wait, hold up. But yeah, it makes sense. That's the work I love, as being a doula, because to me, being a doula is something that we have done for eons, right? Like it's ancestral work. It is like this, we just are present for one another. And for me, it's this, I think I do this mostly is just like, I'm like, have I done anything? And I'm like, no, I just sat with this person who's pregnant or who just gave birth. And I've just been like, what do you need? Like, how you doing? What, like, let's talk about how you're feeling. Let's talk about like, and so much of what comes up is like what I'm supposed to be doing or how I'm supposed to be feeling or and I'm just like, why? Why? So let's little things. Can I massage your feet? Let's just, that's like the self-care, that individual thing. Allowing someone to do that for you, that is so hard for people to just be like, oh my gosh, yeah, touch my feet or touch my hands or right. And that's like a tiny little thing of like when we talk about the spa or the bath or that people are like sometimes poo-poo, like, oh, that's not just self-care, but those little things sometimes add up, right? So I think we cannot discard them. Like, I think we still need to, but that's not the only thing, because of course, self-care is also having access. Do you have access? Whether it's, do you have dental insurance, or are you resourced enough, right, to go to the dentist?
Yeah.
One, to get the mental health that you need. So yes, ideally, we should all be, I believe, we should all be able to afford a therapist and find a really good therapist that is culturally competent and it's just, just right for us, and however, and whatever, and however we need them. But that only happens, what, an hour, maybe 2 hours a week, maybe, if we're lucky, if we can afford it, if we found the right person, which I have not yet, honestly. But beyond that, right, do we have a community that also cares for us? So can I call a friend and ask my friend, how you doing? Do you have time for like 30 minutes to just listen to me? And create that, right? Can we just sit in silence and, like, I don't know, have pizza, watch something together? Can we go shopping? I love that meme that's like, I don't want to spend $75 on an expensive meal to catch up with you. Can you just go run errands with me?
Yes, yes.
Both. I like the, oh my gosh, I went to Vegas and met a friend from camp, actually, who I met at camp. I mentioned camp a lot. It's Patty Dye's Life is a Verb camp that I've been going to since 2013, as often as I can go.
Yeah, and I went last year, and it is amazing.
It's pretty fabulous.
So good. I'm hoping to go this year too. Yeah.
Me too. I've met really beautiful people there, and I know Jen through somebody, through Muse, who's right here. So before camp, but then I got to meet you in person. That was beautiful. But so I met a friend that I had met back, I think 2015 we might have met. And we met in Vegas, and we had this really expensive dinner. Ridiculous, but it was heavenly, that I'll never stop thinking about it. So boom, right? That's that. But also I know that this is a friend that I can text anytime, and we can just be like, today was a really rough day. And it could be like, tell me about it. Sometimes it's like, I don't know, talk about it. I just want to be able to, like, tell you, but I don't. Sometimes it's like, I really need advice. Yeah. Right. So being, yes. And Carly wrote this, community is so important. So yeah, on the errand partner, on the, and we can have partners for lots of different things. If we have a romantic partner, we have a sexual partner, I mean, that's amazing. That's awesome. Sometimes that's not the person, though, that we share all of our anxiety. I can't share all my anxiety with my partner in life, yeah. Because they will, like, be extra about it. So I can't, like, I'm just like, that's gonna give me more anxiety. So I'm like, all right, let me, like, text this person who I just know is, like, my grounding person. So I think they need to go hand in hand. And what self-care is for each of us is going to look different. But I think we can still, what's been the problem, I think, is, and you mentioned it earlier, Jennifer, it's capitalism.
Yeah.
It's that self-care became a business.
Yeah.
And then then people start losing access to things that can be real simple for us, right?
Yeah, that's really beautifully stated. Mm-hmm.
So
yeah.
I'm all for both, though.
Me too. And as you said that, especially the losing access kind of spoke to me, because I think that's sometimes then where the pushback comes, but sometimes the pushback becomes about a concept rather than the system that sort of makes that concept inaccessible. And I think I'm super, full disclosure, I'm so defensive of it, because coming from Audre Lorde, I'm like, okay, so we're going to let Freud, like, influence how people are supported for our mental health for years and years and years, but let Audre Lorde speak some truth, and within 50 years you're like, we're not saying this anymore. Like, not today. Not today. We're going to re-examine self-care, and we're going to give people access back, but we're not going to take that term away, knowing some of the stuff we let fly for a good long time. So I have a personal stake. Yeah, but thank you for how you articulated that, because it does help me to have a little bit more empathy, or think about it differently in terms of why people push back, because it is that loss of access when it becomes a tool of capitalism. I remember seeing in a video, and the person said something like about 6 types of self-care, as if it were like a fact. And I was like, wow. So that happened fast. Like, going from self-care is something we're all into to now there's categories and which type are you. Rest is kind of having a similar moment where I've seen people categorize rest, and I get it if it helps to make things make sense for people. But it's also fascinating to see it start to be. But you can't push back on rest in a way because it's like a human function, even if we don't do it well. You know what I mean?
Well, although I think we've always pushed back on rest, right? Like,
Yeah.
so now, but I think what's really hard is that certain people with clout, what proximity to whiteness, the money, right, and power, end up capitalizing on it. So, my goodness gracious. Yes, and it can be a bypass. Very good. I love that. I'm going to read this. I opened up the chat because I get,
Awesome.
I'm like, I want to see what's going on there too.
Yes, thank you for doing it.
It can also always be a bypass. So discernment is key. Oh, discernment. I love that word. It can be so hard. But yes, that's key. That is so key. So, right, there's the celebrity who like has become real wealthy off of like self-care and including like sexuality. I love so many of the things that are on there, but then I also get really like pissy about it because I'm like, this stuff has been like around forever, right? So then who were people inviting to talk about anti-racism if not the white lady, rather than like these amazing Black authors, Black women who are doing the work? So like rest is resistance, the NAP ministry. That has become my ministry. Love. And I like now I've been doing cultural competency trainings over in Nevada, and like I bring the book with me and I'm like, but here's another example of us when this is why Black Lives Matter, why we need to always elevate the work of Black women, because when Black women are out there getting published, their art being purchased and supported, we all benefit. Like how I have personally benefited from Audre Lorde, from Zora Neale Hurston, from Maya Angelou, like hello, Sonia Sanchez, Trisha Hersey right now. Personally, I can't deny it, right? And what's hurtful is that we start pushing back because that's now just a ritual in social media. So we have to kind of like stay grounded and be like, but these are the roots of it, and not let ourselves be swayed by it, right? Because there's fads, there's like that push and pull.
Yeah.
But if we know we've lived long enough, we know it comes back. Look at how the 80s are again. I mean, I'm being facetious about that piece, but you're right.
You're right, yeah.
So yeah, I don't even know where I was going necessarily with that, but we can't just.
I think you went exactly where we needed to go, and I have like a million thoughts about it, but I love what you're saying, even about the 80s. Actually, that was such a brilliant way to sort of illustrate it like in a crystallized way, because it's true that things come back. And sometimes I think how you said it, I'm not going to say it right, but it's recorded, so we have it. Just in terms of that pushback, sometimes, often, all the times, it feels like all the times, but often it feels like the pushback pushes out the people who sort of gave us this work and gave us this thought process. And it pushes in somebody who has the capital to sort of ride out that pushback and make it a thing, that they can continue. And sometimes they don't even write it out. They're still making money because the pushback is really our cultural. I wish I could remember Bell Hooks. She's got that beautiful, concise, but it's the patriarchal, white supremacist, capitalist whole thing where it's like the pushback is really I think more evidence of the discomfort with marginalized people having a voice and having a stake. We always have influence, but people don't always like it to attribute and to compensate us for what we do. Christina says, yes, the appropriation and monetization of knowledge is violence. We are amazing. So we've got 5 minutes left. And between the chat and our conversation, I was like dancing. I'm like, yes, I dance when I get like a good word and good food, and so I did my good word dance. But if there's anything you want us to know, or if you want to leave us in closing, please do. I just want to, if I can, just shout out real quick that my earrings are from Brandy Morris Art, and I talk about Brandy's work all the time, and she's got some beautiful work currently available. And my t-shirt is Black Women Thriving. That's Erica Hines' project, and you can buy merch to support that project as she works to influence the workplace for Black women. So that's my little commercials. But please, Liz, share anything else you'd like us to think about as we close.
So much, right? The one that you said when there's so much, I'm like, oh. So first, right, y'all participating, Carly and Christina, and hopefully lots of people are going to listen in, know just how sacred each and every one of you are, right? Like your whole bodies, your being, learn and seek out ways to realize like just how sacred you are. And I don't mean sacred in the religious sense, although it could be if that's powerful for you. But it really, to me, that's what helps me around talking about sexuality, talking about liberation, even, why rest is important is because I need it for my brain. I need it for my cells. I need it for just to love in a way where I'm not exhausted, because exhaustion then just doesn't allow me to thrive. So I just love being able to have these conversations, because it helps me belong more, and reminds me that I belong, right? And that each of us belongs exactly the way we are. So I really, really appreciate that. And I want to do a commercial too.
Do a commercial.
It reminded me, because I'm wearing the t-shirt, Protect Trans People, and Queer Birth Worker is, they are on social media. You can find them, Queer Birth Worker. King Ya just does amazing work. And I was trained as a doula in the Mama Glow, which I love. Mama Glow is amazing. Latham Thomas is the founder, so that's another commercial. And if you can watch and search, I think it's called In Our Mother's Gardens. It's on Netflix. It's beautiful, and Latham is actually in there. She was my instructor as a doula. What was lacking in that training for me more was really how to be a full spectrum doula and work with people who did not identify as women. So there's a little bit in there, but not as much as I desired and thought was important. So I've been training with Queer Birth Worker, and it has expanded my universe in so many different ways, both on the personal and professional level. So I will give a shout out to Queer Birth Worker and encourage you to buy their merch and look at their different offerings, because you don't have to be a doula or a birth worker to actually really benefit from their training. So I'll do a commercial for them.
Thank you. I'll make sure to share those links in the Patreon and in the I put it on YouTube unlisted, but I might do a YouTube short, and I'll reach out to you after so that people can have access to that, because that would be nice to share those links.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. You are just an absolute gift of a human, and I am so thankful.
I feel the same way about you.
Thank you. And Christina and Carly, thank you for rocking with us and being here. I am going to share this in the Patreon, so you'll be able to look back and or listen back. And I think that's everything. It's so good to be back. It's been like, I don't know, the end of 22 was a wild ride, but here we are. So thank you for being here. I appreciate you so much. I'll talk to you soon. And I probably will ask you for part 2. Oh my goodness. Okay.
Pleasure. I love it.
All right. Talk to you guys later. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.